crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with another Doodlebug 6x6 paper pad tutorial. I believe this paper pad is called Hello Sunshine, but there'll be a link and more information in the video description. I was actually able to pick up this paper pad at my local Hobby Lobby, so I just wanted to try some paper pads that I found in big box stores just because I know that not everyone has access to online ordering or feels comfortable online ordering, and or choices of like local scrapbook stores. Even my local scrapbook store, which is huge and amazing, doesn't carry a lot of 6x6 pads. So I find myself going online, but I know that that's, not always feasible for everyone. Buying a $6 paper pad and paying $8 in shipping, not ideal. Anyway, as I started today, I tore out the cut apart sheets. As you can see here, I'm going to cut those up and get those ready to use, and then I'm going to start trimming down my papers into A2 size card bases for the most part, and then a couple of them I'll do some other things with. As I was working on this set of cards, I very much wanted to just use up this paper pad. Like, I'm always using up the paper pads when I do it, but it's just one of those things where it was like sitting on my desk. I bought it weeks ago and I hadn't done anything with it, and I kind of have this like log of things that I want to do, card kits stacking up, paper pads stacking up, and so I said, you know what, I'm just going to like get rid of this all tonight, and in a matter of hours get rid of all the paper pad, use it up, make cards. And so with this particular set, I'm not going to do a lot of different and unique cards. I'm going to instead focus on using it up, because I think that that is something that comes up for crafters when you're looking to downsize, destash, etc., etc. Being able to use up your supplies as opposed to trying to always give them away or something like that might be a better solution. So here's how you can make a bunch of cards that will brighten someone's day but won't take you hours and hours and hours and days and etc., etc. So besides cutting some of these paper pads these paper pieces into the A2 size card base, which is about 4 by 5 1/4, because I like to leave a little border around my cards and I put them on white cardstock. I cut a few of them down to 3 by 3, and this is because then there's no waste. A 6 by 6 piece of paper cut to 3 by 3 creates no waste, and it works really well with those square pieces that have come up with this particular paper pad. There are like basically little 2 by 2 squares that you can use with it, and so I'm keeping that in mind, knowing I want to use up a bunch of those squares, and I'll want to give them a little bit more, I want to make them more substantial, because 2 by 2 kind of gets lost on a card and I don't find that it pairs well. So layering it onto a 3 by 3 square, I like the look of that personally, so I'm keeping that in mind. And as I am trimming up these papers, I'm also trying to keep in mind which ones will work well for those 3 by 3 squares, because they're mostly solid, but not cutting too many of those. I don't have enough card bases, because I do try to get about 20 cards out of a paper pad. Since there's 24 papers, I feel like that's a pretty reasonable amount. So I'm kind of like counting my card bases as I, consider it. And here I have a lot of 2 by 6 inch strips and 3/4 inch by 4 inch strips. And when I was finished making 20 cards, there was very little left. I wound up using almost every little bit. As I do sometimes, I'm going to start by taking the 2-inch strips and attaching them into A2 size card bases, because 2 inches will equal 4 inches, and then since they're 6 inches, I can trim them up to that 5 1/4. By committing ahead of time to making these into card base size pieces, I'll be able to get to that number of 20, which might not be your goal. You might prefer to use these as 2-inch strips and use them as layers and accessories on your card. So if you like more layers, that might be a good option for you. I find that sometimes if I add too many layers too many different size pieces, I don't wind up liking it as much. I feel like the card looks a little too busy, whereas with these cards, keeping it simpler tends to work, just because the patterns are so bold, and I really want those little cut apart pieces to kind of be the star of the card. So I don't use as many layers as some people do, but I think that, that looks good too, and if that's more your style, go for it. With this particular paper pad, there are some sayings. There's a 2-inch square that says "Hello Sunshine," so I'm definitely just going to use that as a sentiment. But there's not a lot of sentiments, so I am going to add in a stamp set to make it work. But I'm going to use literally like one stamp from the entire set so that I can, again, keep it simple. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm not going to go find the perfect sentiment for every single, image. So here you see I'm sorting the 2x2 squares, thinking about which ones really make sense for a card, which ones maybe not so much. I think "You Make Me Happy When Skies Are Gray" is great for a card, but it's a little bit odd for my purposes of sending to Cards for Hospitalized Kids since I don't know them. So you could use it if that's, more to your taste, but to me it just seems a little odd because, it's more of a personalized sentiment. Here comes the sun. Not really sure that's a card sentiment. There's one that just says spring. And they do accept holiday-based cards, so I could, add some spring jokes inside and labeling it spring on the outside. Not so bad. I do wind up using that. But, maybe not ideal. And so I like to think about that before I get started so I know which ones do I really want to use first. "Hello Sunshine" was an obvious one. Definitely going to use that. So I immediately went to my 3x3 squares, found one that I liked, and then I'm going to do a really simple layer the square on top of the card base. And this is what I mean about not really overthinking it, not making the cards super unique or fancy, because a lot of them are going to be appreciated anyway. It's more just like the brighten your day sort of thing, rather than having to be the most complex, interesting card that anyone's ever seen. And I think those are totally appreciated too, and I do some of those as well. But I think that the cute little suns and the, things like that, they really, stand by themselves. So as you saw, there was that MFT, My Favorite Things stamp set that was kind of rainbow based, but the saying that I picked out is "You're brilliant, keep doing that." Because to me, that's a really great encouragement sentiment that paired really well with this particular paper pad because there are so many suns, brilliant sun. To me, those personally went really well together. And again, I'm just going to use that sentiment the entire time. I'm going to put it on a stamp block, and I'm going to use VersaFine ink. I'm going to choose VersaFine because it tends to give me a really good impression the first time regardless, and it's also waterproof, so I know that once it's dry it's going to, stay there just fine. But some other black inks that I like for Copic coloring per se, VersaFine does not work for Copic coloring. They don't always give me as crisp of an impression. VersaFine is pigment based, and I think it may even have some sort of oil component to it, but I honestly don't know. I just know that, it doesn't work for Copics, but it works great for sentiments. The way that pigment inks work great for solid stamps, because there's just more ink sticks to the stamp because it doesn't have that water component to it. And so again, keeping with the idea that I put that "Hello Sunshine" on a 3x3, I picked out a couple more of the 2x2 squares that I just really loved, knew I wanted to use, and I started adding them to the 3x3 squares. I liked how the yellow sun paired with the yellow, so the yellow sun is on craft, or brown, and then adding the yellow paper around it, and then onto a craft paper, I felt like that really popped, not doing too much with the colors. And eventually, you don't get as much choice. You kind of have to work with whatever you have left as your card making. But for the first couple of cards, I always kind of just gravitate towards my favorite supplies. I really liked those little clouds with the rainbow rain. And I thought, well, just so that I don't have to worry about it later on, because if I use the rainbow clouds and I don't pair it with the rainbow cloud paper, those might be a little bit harder to match later. So I just paired them up right away, so that I wouldn't have to worry about that. And the next two things that I knew I wanted to use were the little bird, flowers, and fence image, and then this other little scene with the bugs and the flowers. And I decided that I could keep it simple and I used those card bases that I created from the 2-inch strips. I took 2-inch strips and glued another 2-inch strip on top to cover the seam. And this particular time I chose to offset it rather than center it because I thought that later on, if I want to pair one of those 2x3-inch cut aparts that I know I'm going to use, if I put the 2-inch strip, like the pink 2-inch strip in this case, down the center, and then I try to place one of these off center over it, it'll make the whole card look off center. Whereas here, essentially, the cut apart is in the center of the card and the strip is off to the left. So that was sort of like a premeditated, I was intending to do that all along, knowing what I'd be trying to work with. So keeping those things in mind ahead of time can be helpful. If you are just to take one of those 2x3 cut aparts and place it directly over this strip centered, it's not going to have as much weight. It's not going to look like a completed card because there's going to be more empty space. Here, as I'm going to attach the 3x3 square, I do again consider ahead of time that I need to make sure that 2-inch strip is up far enough from the edge of the paper, because if I put it too close to the edge, then it's all going to look sort of jumbled up at the bottom. I want the green square to be hanging off of it a little bit. So it's another thing that I'm going to consider before I glue it all down. I'm a big fan, and you know this if you watch my 6x6 videos, of just sort of placing things down and scooching them around a bit to see what you like in the end. And as you may have noticed, I'm creating 2 of each of these cards. So there are 20 cards in the end, but there's really only like 10 unique designs, with the exception of the ones that were created by gluing the 2-inch strips together. So I created 2 of it, but they'll be slightly different in the sense that the pattern paper that's in the background will be different because they're created from the strips and there's not 2 pieces of that. But it's very similar, and I'm not fussing too much with it. I'm not trying to make every single card special. And I do try to do that sometimes. I do try to mix it up for you guys to give you more ideas of what to use, but I also wanted to kind of use this set as a way to show you that even if you don't make like unique, amazing, interesting cards every time, you'll still have really cute stuff in the end. These cards will still make someone smile. No one's going to judge and see like, oh, you've used that like layout, you know, on 6 cards, because you're probably not going to give all 6 of those cards to the same person. Or if you're donating them to an organization, they're probably not going to give those 6 cards to the same person, but instead spread them across a few different people. And it's going to be more the thought that matters and the thought that is considered rather than the uniqueness of the design. However, if you like unique cards, definitely go for it. As I'm sort of getting towards the end of the paper pad already, this is going to be a much shorter paper pad video just because I am not trying to do as many unique. I notice what I have left, and that's, you know, always what I do, is I kind of like use, you know what I say? I always say I use my favorite stuff first, I go through what I have, the obvious ideas, and then I look at that scrap pile. And I think, what's left in the scrap pile? And how am I going to turn this scrap pile into another couple of cards? So I do have the A2 size card bases, so that's not to worry about, but I'm noticing, you know, off to the right in the little pile are all of these 3/4 by 4-inch strips. And I thought, well, another way to ground this 3x3-inch square would be to use a couple of strips. And I've done some similar stuff like this before, but rather than using that, you know, large 2-inch strip to ground something, I'm going to use a little bit of these little, you know, strips poking out on the ends, and that will help, you know, focus your attention in on the center image, but use up those scraps in a unique way. Because there are a lot of pattern going on. If you use a bunch of those strips, since they're going to be unique, there's not going to be a bunch of the same one. There's only going to be 2 of each one. If you were to use the whole piece of it, it might be overwhelming to have so many patterns on one piece of paper, because here you're basically working with like 5 patterns on one piece of paper. by only showing a tiny bit on each side, it's not so overwhelming. You're not using large pieces of each pattern. You're just sort of sprinkling it in here and there. And also by using that big 3x3 inch square that is a mostly solid, actually it is solid in this collection. It's not one of those lightly patterned, it's a solid green or solid pink on each side. But by using those, you again tone it down quite a bit. And in this one even more so, because I'm using a big piece of this pink paper that's in the background is very slightly polka dotted. It's not solid, but again, by using those much more muted patterns paired with the busy patterns, it doesn't look so much like, you know, all this is going on. So here's where I can't really find what I'm going to put in the center of this green, and I know my sentiment is not enough to be a focal point. I thought maybe I was going to use these April showers, Bring May Flowers, and then I was like, I don't really love it because it's very specific. Like, they'd have to give it to them in April. So I actually decide to instead go with the spring sentiment that I mentioned before, and I cut it down a little bit. So you saw there was like that tiny little pile of scraps, and then these cut-aparts. That's all I have left. And those cut-aparts, plus some of that rainbow washi you just saw me push off to the left, I'm going to send to someone who leaves a comment on this video. So for your chance to win, just leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of this different way of approaching it. They're not all going to be like this. Not all my future 6x6 videos will be this simple. But I just wanted to show you another idea. You can let me know, if you don't know what to leave a comment on. You can mention, the favorite, your favorite card from what I did today, or I don't know, anything you want. I just want to reach out and make sure even those little scraps get used. So that is it for my video today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I do have the Simon Says Stamp July kit coming up soon, and also check for product links in the video description below. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome day. Bye.